Hi, welcome to first of many leveling guides for Diablo 4. The server slam and the launch is about a month or less away, and I want to start my series on how to level each class and build. Obviously, I'm a barbarian player and haven't had a lot of time to play the other classes, so we will be leading with barbarian based builds, but as the game gets closer to the launch, we will eventually be covering all classes. I would highly recommend you subscribe as well as turn on post notifications, as I will be rolling out builds and information for each class for the launch and beyond for Diablo 4. Now in this video, we will be covering how to level my infamous Bloodthorn Barbarian build, so without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to show you how I would level it up personally, but just know that things are subject to change, so when updates come and whatnot before the launch, I will update this, but generally this is going to be how I level it. So this is a bleed build. Generally you want to lead with Flay. So the first point I always get is Flay, followed by Enhanced Flay. Enhanced Flay, I mean, right now the purpose is you really want to get the combat Flay as soon as possible because it starts to give you thorns. And this is going to be your first source of thorns regardless of your gear. And then it gives you damage reduction, which is going to have really good synergy. Unfortunately, you're going to go Flay first, you're going to go Enhanced Flay, and then you're going to pick up Rend because you need another skill here. You want to start getting as many skills as you can, so you pick up Rend next. From here you go back for combat Flay, and by this point you're probably fighting the demon inside the first boss, and you should have these skills to basically finish him off relatively easy. From here I get Enhanced Rend, and then we make the decision here from Furious Rend or Violent Rend. Now for me, I like using Furious Rend because it helps me with sustain on Fury, but keep in mind once you get to a point in the game where you can sustain, you want to go back to Violent Rend. I'm not sure how reliable that is going to be once you don't have legendary aspects, RNG on drops, so you're probably going to be using Furious Rend for a while, but don't be afraid to go to Violent Rend if you feel like you have enough Fury sustain. So we'll pick that one up, and then from here we really going to start picking up a lot of these. So the first one I like to get is Rally Cry. At this point you're really slow, you don't really have any mobility skills, and this build doesn't typically use one, so Rally Cry is going to be your main mobility skill, so I will use that. But also Rally is really good for helping you with resource generation, and sometimes I will go to Violent Rend here if I really want to. Next would be Challenging Shout. Again, another taunt is great. It kind of knocks enemies back. I don't know if it counts as a CC, but when you shout, they kind of get thrown back a little bit, so it kind of helps you with sustain. With control, but also it helps you with sustain because this has 40% damage reduction, so picking it up is really nice to help you. Now you've only have one source of thorns at this point, so it's really important to pick up Outburst here just so you can start getting some thorns. And I imagine you're probably about to do some type of content, like some open world stuff. Outburst is really good to pick up early, I feel like. Next we get Enhanced Challenging Shout. Where is it? Here. And then immediately we want to get a Strategic Challenging Shout, because again this is going to amplify your thorns. It's going to give you thorns based on your maximum life, and this is in my opinion one of the best ways to get thorns real early, so definitely pick this up. From here Warcry becomes available, and Warcry is going to help you because you are still doing Rend and you're still doing Flay. And those are pretty decent skills, especially Rend. Rend does decent damage, so Warcry is going to help you with that. I also get Enhanced Warcry because Berserking, and again, Berserking gives you move speed, it gives you damage, so it's going to further increase your damage and just help you just right click things down, because thorns are good right now, but they're not good enough to do a lot of damage, so you want to build into your Rend a little bit too. Here we just go back to Outburst, and we just double Outburst, and then we get 1 point of Tough as Nails because it's going to give you % thorns, and then it's going to bleed enemies when they hit you with thorns, which is going to again synergize really well with the class. Next we go ahead and go to Rupture. Rupture is going to pop the bleed, so if you're stacking a lot of bleeds, which you should be at this point because your thorns are basically just rocking it, as well as your Rend and your Flay, you're gonna need a way to pop it to make it go easier. From here I usually get Enhanced Rally Cry, which is kind of going back, but at this point you want Unstoppable, and most importantly you want Tactical Rally Cry, so it gives you more Fury generation. You can eventually change that to strategic rally cry later, but for me, I like to use tactical rally cry because I love having enough fury to sustain. And again, we won't necessarily have any legendary aspects unless you're lucky. So I feel like that's more reliable way of giving yourself some reliable fury, right? Next, you get enhanced rupture. Again, this is just trying to get to fighter's rupture because this is going to be your major way of sustaining. Anytime you deal a bleed, you're going to be able to pop it and it's going to heal you, and then you'll do an AoE explosion. I mean, that's important too, but what's most important is having a way to sustain, because generally you're going to be pretty tanky. You're going to have pretty good damage. I wouldn't say amazing at this point because your Warcry uptime isn't the best. Again, the most important thing about this is it's going to give you healing, and so you want to make sure that you have this for sustain. You're generally pretty tanky at this point, so it's going to be hard for you to die, but this is going to help you stay alive, basically. From here, I usually go to powerful Warcry, power Warcry actually, because I mean, usually you don't always, like when you're fighting a boss, you're not going to get the best benefit from this, but when you're mobbing and stuff, you can get some decent benefit, and this is really good for killing elites. There's also quite a few maps in the game, at least dungeons that we've seen early on, that had a dense amount of elites, and this helps with like keeping your damage pressure up for elites, so I think this is great. Now we're gonna double back all the way back to getting thorns, well, tough as nails, for more thorns, because we want a higher percent on our base thorns. At this point, you should have at least a couple of pieces of gear with thorns. Your thorns should be scaling pretty okay at this point, so it's pretty nice to go back to. I think it's a great skill point because it's percent based, and obviously this is better late game than it is early game. You want to get that early point just because, you know, you want to get at least a base percent increase. But later on, you want to get the best value, in my opinion, is getting tough as nails later. From here, I go imposing presence. Where is it? I usually just get all of imposing presence here. It just give you percent health. This will scale your damage as well, because the way thorns work with challenging shout, strategic challenging shout, which will give you more damage based on your health, as well as outburst will give you more damage based on your health. So grabbing this will give you percent health, which synergizes well with this. After that, I usually get Pit Fighter as well. Where is it? I think it's here. I like Pit Fighter, or you can get Booming Voice at this point. Honestly, Booming Voice probably be better, but Booming Voice is really nice. If you're playing in a team, you can get these two, especially Raid Leader. This is super good when you're playing with allies that are a little more squishy, because it still gives you 3% heals when you max it out per second. And eventually with this build, you'll eventually have enough to keep your war cries permanently up. It won't be permanently up for your allies, but it'll be permanently up for you. But you'll have a good uptime for your allies, and it can eventually heal them. This is pretty decent, especially if you're doing raid stuff, so I would highly recommend it. And this could be okay for damage reduction as well. If you're having a problem with things hitting you too hard, you really shouldn't be, because you're really tanky. But this should help a lot. Afterwards, we want to pick up Pit Fighter. This is going to give you more damage to enemies close, and then it's going to reduce damage you take from distance enemies. I think it's a great skill. I mean, it's not the best, but again, you get a lot of extra damage, 10% almost, and then you just take a lot of the range damage reduction. From this point on, it kind of depends on your legendaries, your aspects, where you're at in the game. You won't see this, you won't be using this, at least in the server slam, but you will see this like if you're going beyond the server slam. So early on, you're probably very likely going to want to get unconstrained, because I feel like this one's harder to sustain, Unbridled Rage, because it requires more Fury, and you may not have legendaries that will be able to cover your Fury costs. I was able to do it in the beta and all that, because, you know, obviously we had higher drop rates. But for reliability, I would go with Unconstrained until I have some of the aspects that are like really good for Fury generation. With that said though, I did want to say beyond this, there are a couple of options that you can go. For me, if I wanted to change this skill build up a little bit, I would consider getting Wrath of Berserker and change it out for Warcry. It does give a very long time on Berserking and Unstoppable, but mainly the Berserking, and it synergizes really well with Unconstrained. You could do that. Later on, I would probably swap over to Unbridled Rage, since my Berserking would probably be near 100% uptime with my shouts and stuff, and I'll have a lot of Fury generation. So Unbridled Rage could be really good for that too. I don't think I would ever use Gushing Wound because I think this is based off of crit strike stuff and we're not a crit build. And so just know that you're probably going to be restricted to these two. When it comes to upgrading anything else, like there's some other pretty good passives that I like. But you kind of just level whatever you feel comfortable with at this point. But that's generally how the build is going to go. Once you transition to the end game, you're going to probably base your talents that you take based upon the aspects and stuff that you get on your gear. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. So yeah, hopefully this helped you guys out.